The cabin lights flickered as turbulence shook the plane, but it wasn't the storm outside that made Isabel's hands tremble. Her phone screen glowed dimly in the darkened first-class cabin, and her breath caught in her throat as she read the email one more time. The words blurred together, yet their meaning hit her like a freight train. You are hereby terminated effective immediately. Her chest tightened. She stared at the message again, hoping it was some cruel joke or technical error. It wasn't. 3 decades of loyalty, building deals, mentoring teams, pouring every ounce of herself into this company, and they had fired her mid-flight, while she crossed continents to close the deal of a lifetime. Isabel leaned back against the leather seat, trying to steady her racing heart. Outside, lightning illuminated jagged clouds, but inside, all she could hear was the deafening roar of betrayal. This wasn't just about losing a job, it was about being discarded after giving everything. And if things weren't bad enough, the text messages from her assistant began flooding in moments later. 3 clients pulled out, $155 million gone overnight. She gripped the armrest so hard her knuckles turned white. How could this happen? Just hours ago, she'd been on top of the world, a seasoned negotiator closing what would have been the largest merger in her industry's history. Now, everything was unraveling faster than she could process. It hadn't always been like this. 30 years earlier, Isabel had walked into her first boardroom meeting with nothing but determination and a notebook filled with scribbled ideas. Back then, she was younger, brasher, full of dreams that seemed impossible to everyone except herself. People underestimated her constantly, her quiet demeanor, her lack of flashy credentials, but she let her work speak for itself. Deal by deal, she climbed the ladder, earning respect and admiration along the way. Over the years, Isabel became known not just for her sharp mind but also for her ability to connect with people. Clients trusted her because she listened, not just to their business needs but to their fears, hopes, and ambitions. Colleagues admired her because she never hesitated to share credit when success came knocking. Even now, at 62, she refused to slow down. Age meant wisdom, experience, and resilience, all qualities she brought to the table daily. Or so she thought. But lately, something had shifted. The corporate landscape was changing rapidly, dominated by younger executives who spoke in buzzwords and prioritized short-term gains over long-term relationships. Isabel often felt like an outsider in her own company, watching values she held dear erode under pressure to innovate at any cost. Still, she adapted. She learned new technologies, embraced data-driven strategies, and even mentored young talent eager to learn from her vast experience. Yet no matter how much she adjusted, there was always someone whispering behind closed doors that she was past her prime. That notion stung, especially tonight. As the plane jolted through another patch of turbulence, Isabel replayed the events leading up to this moment. The historic deal she'd spent months negotiating, a partnership spanning 3 continents, was supposed to cement her legacy. Instead, it felt like the very thing that sealed her fate. Somewhere between conference calls and late-night strategy sessions, cracks had formed beneath her feet. She just hadn't seen them until it was too late. When the plane finally touched down in Zurich, Isabel stepped off wearily, her suitcase trailing behind her. The cold Swiss air bit at her cheeks, but she barely noticed. All she could think about was the meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning, the one where she'd planned to announce the deal's completion. What would she say now? That she'd been fired mid-air? That the clients she'd worked so hard to secure had vanished without explanation? As she made her way through customs, her phone buzzed incessantly. Messages poured in from colleagues, friends, even former clients. Some offered condolences, others asked for details. A few were downright accusatory, questioning whether she'd done something wrong. Isabel ignored them all, focusing instead on finding her hotel. She needed space to think, to breathe, to figure out how to salvage whatever remained of her career, and her dignity. The lobby of the luxury hotel was bustling with travelers checking in and out, oblivious to the chaos swirling inside Isabel's mind. She approached the front desk, forcing a polite smile as she handed over her passport. The receptionist greeted her warmly, but Isabel barely registered the interaction. Her thoughts were consumed by questions. Who had orchestrated her firing? Why had those clients pulled out? Was this truly the end? Her room overlooked Lake Zurich, its surface shimmering under the moonlight. For a moment, she allowed herself to stand there, gazing out at the serene view. It was beautiful, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within her. Slowly, she sank onto the edge of the bed, clutching her phone tightly. There had to be answers somewhere. Someone knew why this had happened, and she intended to find out. The next morning, Isabel woke before dawn, her body heavy with exhaustion but her mind restless. Sleep had eluded her entirely, replaced by endless cycles of anger, disbelief, and fear. She showered quickly, dressed in her sharpest suit, and headed downstairs for coffee. The caffeine did little to calm her nerves, but it gave her something to focus on as she scrolled through emails and news articles related to her company. One headline caught her eye: Tech giant shakes up leadership amid record losses. Her stomach churned as she clicked through to the article. According to reports, the company's stock price had plummeted following rumors of internal mismanagement. Executives were scrambling to distance themselves from blame, pointing fingers at outdated practices and poor decision-making. Isabel's name wasn't mentioned directly, but she didn't need to see it in print to know she'd been sacrificed as part of the cleanup effort. Her frustration boiled over. After everything she'd done, for the company, for her team, for her clients, they'd thrown her under the bus without hesitation. Worse still, they'd undermined her efforts, sabotaging the very deal she'd poured her soul into. It was clear now that her termination wasn't random, it was calculated. Someone higher up had decided she was expendable, collateral damage in their quest to save face. Determined to fight back, Isabel drafted a response to the termination email. Every word burned with indignation, yet she kept her tone professional. She demanded answers, citing specific clauses in her contract that guaranteed severance pay and protection against wrongful dismissal. She attached copies of correspondence with clients, highlighting her contributions to the deal and refuting claims that she'd somehow failed in her duties. When she hit send, a small sense of satisfaction washed over her. At least she wasn't going down without a fight. By midday, Isabel found herself sitting across from Marcus, the CEO of one of the companies involved in the merger. They met at a cafe near his office, tucked away in a quiet corner where prying eyes wouldn't intrude. Marcus greeted her warmly, though his expression betrayed a hint of concern. He'd heard about her firing, of course, and wanted to understand what had happened. "I don't know where to begin," Isabel admitted, stirring her coffee absently. "Everything fell apart so quickly." Marcus nodded sympathetically. "We were shocked when our legal team informed us you'd been let go. We assumed it was a misunderstanding." "It wasn't," Isabel said bitterly. "They cut me loose while I was en route to finalize the agreement. Then suddenly, 2 other key partners backed out. I'm starting to think none of this was coincidental." Marcus frowned, leaning forward slightly. "What do you mean?" Isabel hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. Trust was fragile these days, even with long-time allies like Marcus. Finally, she decided honesty was her best option. "I believe someone orchestrated this. Someone inside my company saw an opportunity to take credit for my work, or bury it entirely, and seized it. I just don't know who yet." Marcus looked troubled. "If that's true, it changes everything. We entered this partnership based on your reputation, Isabel. Without you, I'm not sure we can move forward." His words struck a nerve. Losing the deal was painful enough, but hearing confirmation that her presence mattered, that her absence left a void, felt like both validation and defeat. She forced herself to stay composed. "I understand," she said quietly, "but I won't give up without a fight. Not after everything I've invested." Over the next few days, Isabel threw herself into uncovering the truth. She reached out to former colleagues, digging for information about the circumstances surrounding her termination. Some were hesitant to talk, fearing repercussions if they spoke out. Others hinted at power struggles within upper management, suggesting that Isabel's departure might have been politically motivated. One name kept surfacing: Daniel Hartwell, the newly appointed CFO. Young, ambitious, and ruthless, Daniel had risen through the ranks swiftly, earning praise for his bold initiatives and controversial cost-cutting measures. Rumor had it he viewed senior employees like Isabel as liabilities, expensive relics of a bygone era better replaced with fresh blood. If anyone stood to gain from dismantling her work, it was him. Isabel arranged a meeting with an old friend, Rachel, who still worked in the company's finance department. They met discreetly at a park bench, bundled against the crisp autumn air. Rachel confirmed Isabel's suspicions. Daniel had been lobbying hard to dissolve several long-standing partnerships, including the one Isabel had championed. His argument? They were too risky, too costly, and ultimately unnecessary in today's market. But you know as well as I do that's nonsense, Rachel whispered urgently. These deals were solid. Profitable. He's using them as scapegoats to cover his own mistakes. Isabel clenched her fists. So it was true. Daniel had orchestrated her downfall, framing her termination as a necessary sacrifice while secretly undermining her efforts to protect himself. The realization ignited a fire within her. She wouldn't let him get away with it, not without exposing the truth. As Isabel plotted her next move, memories of her early days flooded back. She remembered the countless late nights spent poring over contracts, the thrill of landing her first major client, the pride of watching junior employees grow into leaders under her guidance. Those experiences had shaped her, taught her resilience, and fueled her passion for creating meaningful connections. Despite the pain of recent events, she couldn't deny the joy those moments had brought her. And maybe that was the key. Maybe this wasn't the end of her journey, it was simply a turning point. If Daniel and his cronies thought they could silence her, they were sorely mistaken. Isabel had built her career on trust, integrity, and perseverance. Those principles hadn't failed her, people had. But she wasn't ready to walk away, not yet. With renewed determination, Isabel began drafting a plan. She would gather evidence, expose Daniel's manipulations, and reclaim her place in the industry. It wouldn't be easy, and it certainly wouldn't happen overnight. But she owed it to herself, and to everyone who had ever believed in her, to try. For now though, she allowed herself a moment of peace. Sitting alone in her hotel room, she opened the window and let the cool breeze wash over her. Below, Lake Zurich sparkled in the sunlight, a reminder that even the darkest storms eventually pass. Whatever lay ahead, Isabel knew one thing for certain, she wasn't finished fighting. Not by a long shot. Isabel spent the next several weeks meticulously piecing together evidence of Daniel Hartwell's misconduct. It was painstaking work, requiring her to dig through years of emails, financial reports, and internal communications. She reached out to trusted allies within the company, people who had witnessed his manipulative tactics firsthand, and slowly but surely, a damning picture began to emerge. Daniel hadn't just targeted Isabel, he'd systematically dismantled other profitable partnerships under the guise of streamlining operations. His real motive? To cover up massive losses from risky investments he'd championed earlier in the year. By cutting ties with long-standing clients like those involved in Isabel's deal, he hoped to shift blame onto senior leadership while positioning himself as a visionary savior. Armed with this information, Isabel knew she had two options, go public or take it directly to the board. Going public would be explosive, a media circus that could irreparably damage the company, but it might also destroy any chance she had of rebuilding bridges. Taking it to the board was riskier, given their tendency to protect their own, but if she played her cards right, she might still salvage something meaningful. She decided on the latter. The meeting with the board was tense. Isabel walked into the sleek conference room wearing the same confidence she'd carried throughout her career, though inside, her nerves were frayed. Around the table sat familiar faces, some supportive, others skeptical, and a few openly hostile. Daniel sat at the far end, smirking slightly as if he already knew how this would play out. "Thank you for seeing me," Isabel began, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was about to reveal. "I'm here because I believe there are critical truths about recent decisions that need to come to light, not just for my sake, but for the future of this company." She launched into her presentation, laying out every piece of evidence she'd gathered. Emails showed Daniel pressuring legal teams to terminate contracts prematurely. Financial records revealed gaping holes where funds should have been allocated to sustain key partnerships. Testimonies from colleagues confirmed his dismissive attitude towards senior staff and his eagerness to dismantle anything they'd built. As she spoke, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, some scribbling notes furiously, others leaning forward with growing alarm. Daniel's smirk faltered, replaced by a thin-lipped scowl. When Isabel finished, there was a heavy silence. Finally, Margaret Chen, the chairwoman, broke it. "Ms. Laurent, we appreciate your diligence in bringing these matters to our attention. Clearly, there are serious allegations here that require further investigation." Daniel tried to interject, stammering excuses and deflecting blame, but his protests only made him look more guilty. For the first time in months, Isabel felt a flicker of hope. Weeks later, the fallout became official. An independent audit confirmed Isabel's claims, exposing not only Daniel's mismanagement but also the broader culture of short-sighted decision-making he represented. He was removed from his position immediately, and several other executives implicated in his schemes followed suit. The board issued a formal apology to Isabel, acknowledging the injustice of her termination and offering her reinstatement, with a promotion to Vice President of Strategic Partnerships. But Isabel surprised everyone when she declined the offer. "I've given decades of my life to this company," she said during a private conversation with Margaret. "And while I appreciate the gesture, I think it's time for me to forge a new path. This experience has shown me that loyalty isn't always rewarded, but integrity always matters. I want to build something of my own now, something rooted in the values I've always believed in." Margaret nodded thoughtfully. "You'll have our full support, Isabel. Whatever you choose to do next, know that you've earned it." True to her word, Isabel founded her own consultancy firm, specializing in ethical business practices and sustainable partnerships. Her reputation preceded her, and within months, she had a roster of high-profile clients eager to benefit from her expertise. Among them were Marcus and two of the original partners from the ill-fated merger. They'd refused to abandon ship entirely and were thrilled to collaborate with her again under better circumstances. Her firm quickly gained traction, earning accolades for its innovative approach to global partnerships. Young professionals flocked to work with her, inspired by her resilience and determination. Isabel took pride in mentoring them, sharing lessons learned over a lifetime of highs and lows. One evening, as she stood on the balcony of her new office overlooking the city skyline, Isabel reflected on everything she'd been through. The betrayal, the uncertainty, the fight, it had all led her here. She wasn't bitter about the past. Instead, she saw it as a chapter that had strengthened her resolve and clarified her purpose. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from Rachel, congratulating her on yet another successful client acquisition. Isabel smiled, typing back a quick thank you before setting the device aside. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. For the first time in a long while, Isabel felt truly at peace. She'd faced adversity head-on and emerged stronger for it. And as she gazed out at the vibrant city lights, she knew one thing for certain: this wasn't the end of her story, it was the beginning of something extraordinary.